Oh, I remember a time when my father and I, well, he told me one morning, he said that he'd give me a ride or help me out delivering newspapers early in the winter morning. It was a cold winter day. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning when I used to deliver the newspapers. And so I told my dad, I said, no, that's okay, I can do it, I can handle it. In other words, just don't worry about me, sort of thing. And so I went on and started delivering the newspapers. And I don't remember if it was actual snowing, but we had about 2 feet on the ground anyways. And it was cold and dark. And all of a sudden I seen these headlights like from down the street. And I go, why would they be headlights at this early in the morning? And come to find out, he got closer, it was my dad. He was, come on, get in the car, And he wanted me to make sure I was safe. He wanted to make sure I was warm because I was shivering, I was cold. I was trying to be a big shot, I was trying to be a man at 12 years old. And so together, he drove me up to all the, where I had to deliver the newspapers. And from there, we went back home. And I do remember saying, thanks, Dad. And it really meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to me because he took his time, his busy morning, and he's always very, very punctual, up at 5, got to do this, shave and everything. He skipped everything and he went right to me. He wanted me to make sure his son was taken care of. And to this day, it just means a lot to me, and I do tell him that too. It does mean a lot to me how much my dad really loved me and how much I really loved my dad. And we still love each other. That's it.
I remember the time when my father and I hugged for the first time. I was 49 years old, and my son Jason and I had planned to meet my dad at an English pub in the valley. And the idea was that we were going to encourage my dad to complete his relationship with my youngest brother, David. And so he decided he wanted to meet us there. He knew what we were up to. And the way it ended up was that for the first time, my father hugged me. He said, well, if I'm going to hug your brother and help him to go off and start a new life, then I suppose I should start with you. And he hugged my son, and then he hugged me. And I remember saying to my son later, that's the first time I remember my dad hugging me.
How does that story touch you? It in so many ways, my relationship with my father, but that moment was sort of a culmination of so many things, because my father was not a particularly physically expressive, loving man. And so for him to do that was a mixture of probably 100 emotions. And it let me know at that moment that I had learned from my dad how important it was to hug, because my son and I hugged all the time. And we told each other that we loved each other all the time, at least once a day. But my dad never did anything like that. He'd never say, I love you. He'd never hug us. He was a typical father born in the 20s, in the 1920s. And it just reminded me that I'd done the right thing in always hugging my kids and always telling them I loved them. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
You know, my dad I refer to as my stepdad, and he's been my stepdad since I was 5, and really everything that I've learned from my dad I've learned from him, and he really was firm with me, but was fairly hands off. But there came a time when I think he just got fed up with my crap, because what made his life miserable was when my mom was miserable. And it took him a little while to catch on, but he realized that I was the one making her miserable. And I can't even remember now what it is that I did or what I said, but I did something to really piss her off. And he took me out into the barn. And this is never good when my dad asks you to go into the barn. And I remember that he picked up my Babe Ruth 32-inch baseball bat with his left hand. And he lifted that bat up in the air and he backhanded it on the floor of the barn and shattered the bat in half. And he looked me right in the eye and he said, "Do you fucking understand how pissed off I am?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And whatever it was I was doing, I never did again. And that's the only time I ever saw him really, really angry and really punctuate his point like that. And sorry for the language, but that's exactly what he said. And it still ricochets in my brain today. And so if he meant to scare the crap out of me that day and teach me a lesson, he certainly did. And I still have no idea how you break a 32 Babe Ruth and you backhand it on the floor. But he's quite capable of it.
The time I'm remembering is when I was very young, probably about 3 or 4 years old. And I believe my little brother had been born, but my little sister had not been born yet. So I guess that made me 3. And one night, in what for me was the middle of the night, I woke up and maybe I heard the TV or something, but anyway, I went walking out to the doorway of the living room, and my mom and my dad were sitting on the couch, and he had his arm around her, and they're both watching TV. And you know, I'm probably standing there in the doorway rubbing my eyes because I just woke up. And my father just did one thing. The only thing that changed was his finger came up, just like that. And he's pointing back at my bedroom, and I didn't need a translator to figure out that he wanted me to just don't say anything, just go back to bed, you know. And I recall in the moment I was pretty hurt. My dad doesn't understand my needs, blah blah blah. And it felt pretty significantly hurt. My feelings were hurt, you know. It wasn't until 40 years later that, thinking back on that little incident, a little tiny thing, I realized that besides the hurt, there was also a feeling of some kind of security there, you know. And I learned through my interactions with other men that what my father was being in that moment was he was being the lawgiver. And there's a certain security for men in that, to know, I know how to act, I know what to do, I know what's right, and to be able to act on that. Back in that day, you know, I simply turned around, marched back into my bedroom, went to bed, went to sleep, and I was okay. I didn't feel okay, but I was okay.